Darkness drapes over the quiet Florida neighborhood, where homes sit in perfect symmetry, their neatly trimmed hedges and warm porch lights giving a sense of security. But behind these doors, hidden beyond the glow of holiday decorations, still lingering from Christmas, secrets breathe in the silence. It is December 28th, 2017, and the air is thick with an eerie stillness, one that Ashley Wilson cannot yet name, but can feel settling deep in her chest. 6 months pregnant, exhausted from another grueling shift at work, Ashley turns onto her street, her car's headlights sweeping over the familiar, yet somehow unsettling sight of her home. The driveway is empty, the curtains are drawn, the house is dark. Michael isn't supposed to be here, but the thought of him lingers like a shadow in the back of her mind. She pulls the car to a stop and lets out a slow breath. The day has been long, draining, the weight of her pregnancy pressing on her body. But it's not just the physical exhaustion. There's something else, a heaviness that has been growing over the past few weeks. Something unspoken. A tension in her marriage that no amount of forced conversation could smooth over. Michael had been distant, more than distant, cold, calculating. His words, once loving, had turned clipped and measured. The man she married was still there, but beneath his familiar voice and rehearsed smiles, something had changed. Ashley had felt it, the kind of change that made her stomach twist and her instincts bristle. She had tried to dismiss it, blaming hormones, stress, fatigue. But now, sitting in her car, staring at the shadowed silhouette of her house, that unease coils tighter around her chest. For a moment she stays there, hands gripping the steering wheel, listening to the soft hum of the engine. Her fingers absently brush against her belly, a small reassurance. Then she forces herself to move. She reaches for her bag, then her keys, then opens the car door, stepping into the cool night air. The street is too quiet. No dogs barking, no distant chatter from neighbors returning from holiday gatherings. Just silence. She walks toward the front door, her boots clicking softly against the pavement. Each step feels heavier than the last. The motion-activated porch light flickers on, casting sharp shadows across the doorway. She shifts her bag on her shoulder, gripping her keys a little tighter. The silence feels unnatural now, thick and waiting. She exhales, shaking off the feeling, and reaches for the lock. But her fingers slip. The keys tumble from her grasp, landing with a sharp metallic clink against the concrete. Ashley sighs, shifting her weight as she crouches to pick them up. And then, her phone buzzes, a sharp vibration against the fabric of her coat. She freezes. A strange ripple of dread washes over her. Slowly, carefully, she straightens, balancing the keys in one hand as she pulls out her phone with the other. The screen glows in the darkness. A text message. Unknown number. "Whatever you do, don't touch the door." She stares at the screen. A chill moves down her spine. Her fingers tighten around the phone. She looks up at the door, her breath coming quicker now. Her instincts scream at her to listen, but her mind fights to make sense of it. Why would someone send this? Who sent it? And why does she suddenly feel like she is standing at the edge of something unseen, something waiting to pull her in? She steps back, phone still in hand. Her gaze locks onto the doorknob. There, a faint humming sound, barely perceptible. The dim glow from the porch light catches something unusual. Small blackened marks along the metal handle. Her stomach drops. Electricity. She swallows hard, her mind racing. If she had touched the handle, would she have been electrocuted? The question is too horrifying to answer. Ashley's hand trembles as she lowers her phone. Fear settles deep in her chest. Something is wrong, very wrong. She forces herself to move, to think. Her eyes dart to the side of the house. The garage. It's open just a crack. Michael never leaves it open, ever. But tonight it is. An exit, a safer way inside. She turns on her heel, her pace quickening. Her heart pounds as she reaches the garage door, pushing it open carefully. The air inside is thick, still carrying the faint scent of metal and dust. She steps in cautiously, her breath shallow. Inside, the house is dark except for the blinking glow of the digital clock on the stove. She flicks on a light. It flickers. Once, twice, then steadies. The faint hum of electricity buzzes through the walls. Ashley moves toward the breaker panel in the hallway. She stops. The cover is slightly ajar. Her stomach clenches. She reaches out, fingertips grazing the edge before pulling it open. Inside, something has been tampered with. A bundle of wires, neatly manipulated, leading toward the circuits connected to the front door. Her hands fly to her mouth. This was intentional. This was meant to kill her. A sharp gasp escapes her lips. Michael. The realization crashes over her like a wave, leaving her breathless. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, the man who once promised to protect her. Could he have done this? Could he have set this trap, knowing she would be the one to walk through that door? She backs away from the panel, hands shaking. She needs to get out. She needs help. She needs her phone. Fumbling with the screen, she pulls up her call log. Her fingers hover over the screen for only a second before she presses the name that feels safest. Laura. The line rings once, twice. Then, Ash? What's wrong? Her voice is steady, familiar, but Ashley's own voice barely comes out. I think Michael did something to the house. I don't feel safe. A pause. What do you mean? Ashley turns, scanning the darkened house, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in. Every shadow feels deeper. Every creak in the walls is suddenly louder. And somewhere, outside in the night, Michael is out there. She doesn't know where. She doesn't know if he's watching. But she knows one thing for certain. She was never supposed to make it inside alive. The trap had been set. The only mistake, she never touched the door. Once inside, Ashley's apprehension grew. She recalled the security cameras her husband, Michael Scott Wilson, had installed months earlier. Seeking reassurance, she accessed the footage on her phone. What she saw sent chills down her spine. Earlier that day, Michael had been tampering with the front door, meticulously connecting wires. Another angle showed him leaving the house with a bag of tools. Panic set in. Clutching her phone, Ashley fled to her neighbor, Mr. Davidson, a man in his 50s known for his kindness. Trembling, she recounted the disturbing footage. Recognizing the gravity, Mr. Davidson immediately dialed 911. Within minutes, the serene street was flooded with flashing lights as police and firefighters arrived. Officers secured the perimeter while firefighters, equipped with specialized tools, approached the front door. A voltage tester confirmed their worst fears. The doorknob had been rigged to deliver a lethal electric shock. Had Ashley touched it, both she and her unborn child could have been killed. Investigators delved deeper into the scene. The home's electrical panel had been manipulated to channel a deadly current to the front door. This was no accident. It was a calculated attempt on Ashley's life. As the investigation unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. Michael's personal belongings were missing, and his car was gone. It became evident that after setting his deadly trap, he had fled. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered, a receipt from a local hardware store for electrical components, dated just days prior. Surveillance footage from the store corroborated this, showing Michael purchasing the items used in his sinister plot. Ashley Wilson, bearing the emotional scars of her husband's betrayal, found solace in the safety of her child and the support of her community. The harrowing experience served as a stark reminder of the unforeseen dangers that can lurk within one's own home. As emergency responders secured the scene at the Wilson residence, detectives and forensic teams worked quickly to unravel the details of what could have been a fatal crime. The front door, seemingly ordinary at first glance, concealed a sophisticated yet crude attempt to turn an everyday entrance into a lethal trap. Detective Lisa Carter, a veteran investigator with the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, arrived at the scene. She had seen her share of crime, but few cases had the kind of calculated intent that this one did. As she approached the front door, she was met by forensic specialists who were carefully dismantling the wiring that had been affixed to the handle. A team of electricians confirmed what initial responders had suspected. The wiring had been deliberately connected to the home's electrical system in a way that would deliver a deadly shock the moment the handle was touched. A device inside the home had been used to amplify the voltage, ensuring that even the slightest contact could cause severe injury or death. The burn marks on the handle and the distinct humming sound Ashley Wilson had noticed were undeniable evidence that this setup was meant to kill. The meticulous nature of the trap suggested prior knowledge of electrical work. Investigators knew that the suspect had to have some expertise in handling wiring. That realization quickly narrowed their focus to Michael Scott Wilson, Ashley's estranged husband. While the investigation at the house continued, authorities worked to locate Michael, who had been absent from the property. A trace on his phone led officers to a motel in Knoxville, Tennessee, hundreds of miles away. When officers arrived at his room, they knocked firmly on the door. A moment later, Michael Wilson opened it, shirtless, appearing slightly disoriented. Behind him, a woman, later identified as Vanessa, his mistress, sat on the bed. Michael feigned confusion when officers informed him that he was a suspect in a criminal investigation. He insisted he had been out of town for work and knew nothing about what had happened at his home in Florida. He claimed that if anything had gone wrong there, it had nothing to do with him. But detectives were already uncovering evidence that contradicted his claims. As officers scanned the motel room, they noticed a crumpled piece of paper on the nightstand. When Detective Carter examined it, she immediately recognized its significance. A receipt from a hardware store dated just a day before the trap had been set. The purchased items included insulated gloves, copper wiring, and electrical tape, exactly the materials used in the setup at Ashley's home. The timeline of the purchase perfectly matched the estimated time of the crime. It was the first solid piece of physical evidence linking Michael directly to the act. In the aftermath of the initial investigation, forensic experts delved deeper into the evidence collected from the Wilson residence. Their meticulous analysis uncovered critical details that would prove pivotal in the case against Michael Scott Wilson. When officers questioned Vanessa about Michael's whereabouts, her responses were initially vague. She claimed they had been together, traveling, and that Michael had been acting completely normal. But as the interrogation continued, her confidence wavered. She admitted that Michael had made disturbing comments in recent weeks. He had mentioned that his problems were about to be solved. He told her that soon they would be able to start a new life together, free from the complications of his marriage. One particular statement stood out. Vanessa, visibly shaken, told investigators that Michael had laughed when talking about Ashley, saying, "Sometimes people just disappear." With this information, detectives had enough to make an arrest. When officers placed Michael Wilson in handcuffs, he remained disturbingly calm. He barely reacted, simply smirking as Detective Carter read him his rights. "You can't prove a damn thing," he said, but investigators knew otherwise. The evidence was stacking up against him. Back in Florida, forensic analysis confirmed that the electrical setup at Ashley's house had been manually rigged. The hardware store receipt, the materials found at the scene, and Vanessa's testimony painted a clear picture of premeditated intent. Inside the cold, windowless walls of the interrogation room, Michael Scott Wilson sat across from Detective Lisa Carter. Hours had passed since his arrest, but he showed no signs of nervousness. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk still lingering on his face, as if none of this was real. Detective Carter knew his type well. Men who believed they were smarter than the system, convinced they could outplay law enforcement. But she also knew that, no matter how composed he appeared, there was always a breaking point, and she was going to find it. Carter started methodically, laying out the evidence piece by piece, never rushing, never raising her voice. She slid a folder across the table and opened it, revealing Michael's phone records. "December 26th, she said, tapping the page. "You called a burner phone. Twice. That phone was later used to send an anonymous warning text to Ashley. Who else would have known about that setup?" Michael barely glanced at the document. He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "Coincidence," he muttered. Carter didn't react. Instead, she pulled out another piece of evidence. A printout of his Google search history. She read the queries out loud. "How much electricity does it take to kill a person? Can you survive 120 volts? How to wire a door for electric shock?" Michael's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. It was the smallest shift, but Carter caught it. She continued. A grainy security still from the hardware store was placed in front of him, showing Michael at the register, purchasing insulated gloves, copper wiring, and electrical tape, the very items used in the trap. "This isn't looking good, Michael." Her voice remained calm. "You planned this. You knew exactly what you were doing." Michael exhaled through his nose, staring at the table. He was still playing the game. waiting for the right moment to deny everything, to twist the narrative. But Carter wasn't done yet. She reached into the folder one last time and retrieved an audio recorder. She pressed play. Ashley's voice filled the room. Her words, recorded earlier at the police station, were steady but filled with raw emotion. "I trusted you. I carried your child. Why did you want us dead?" The silence in the room was heavy. For the first time, Michael's confidence wavered. His jaw clenched. His fingers curled slightly on the table. The weight of his own actions was finally pressing down on him. Carter leaned forward, lowering her voice. "She's still alive, Michael. That means you failed. And now you have a choice. You can sit here and pretend none of this happened, or you can start telling the truth." For the first time since his arrest, Michael had nothing to say. Investigators retrieved a pair of work gloves from Michael Wilson's personal belongings. Detailed analysis revealed that the gloves exhibited corresponding burn patterns, indicating they had been in direct contact with the electrified door handle. This connection provided tangible evidence linking Michael to the tampering of the door. Further forensic investigation focused on the electrical panel within the residence. Technicians discovered that several wires had been deliberately stripped and reconfigured to channel electrical current to the front door handle. Latent fingerprint analysis on the exposed wires revealed identifiable prints. Upon comparison, these fingerprints matched those of Michael Scott Wilson, conclusively placing him at the scene and directly implicating him in the modification of the home's electrical system. Armed with this compelling forensic evidence, the prosecution strengthened its case against Michael Scott Wilson. During the trial, experts testified to the significance of the burn marks and fingerprint matches, providing clear and scientific corroboration of Michael's involvement in the attempted harm of his estranged wife. The jury, presented with the totality of evidence, including the forensic findings, testimonies regarding Michael's prior actions, and his documented intentions, deliberated on the charges. Michael Scott Wilson was found guilty of multiple charges, including attempted aggravated battery on a pregnant victim and grand theft. The presiding judge, taking into account the severity of the offenses and the premeditated nature of the act, sentenced Michael to 3 years in prison with the possibility of release in less than a year due to time served and other considerations. This case underscores the critical role of forensic science in uncovering the truth and ensuring justice is served. The detailed analysis of seemingly minor evidence, such as burn marks and latent fingerprints, can provide the decisive link between a suspect and a criminal act, highlighting the importance of meticulous investigative work in the pursuit of justice. In court, Wilson's defense team attempted to argue that the setup had been an accident or a misunderstanding. They claimed there was no clear proof that he had intended to harm Ashley specifically. However, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The jury was shown the security footage from Ashley's home, revealing Michael tampering with the door just hours before the trap was discovered. The receipt from the hardware store placed him at the scene of preparation. Vanessa's testimony established motive. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, a punishment that left many, including Ashley, frustrated. Despite his attempt to kill her and their unborn child, he would serve only a fraction of what the prosecution had hoped for. Michael Wilson's case serves as a reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of domestic disputes. It highlights the importance of listening to intuition, recognizing warning signs, and seeking help before a situation escalates to violence. Ashley's quick thinking and the involvement of law enforcement likely saved her life. Without the security footage, the anonymous warning text, and her decision to enter through the side door, the outcome could have been tragically different. The case also raises important questions about the justice system and how domestic violence-related crimes are prosecuted. Should an attempted electrocution be considered attempted murder? Should sentencing reflect the potential harm rather than just the immediate outcome? The trial of Michael Scott Wilson drew widespread attention. The prosecution wasted no time in painting a chilling picture of his intent. They outlined his financial struggles, the debts piling up, the insurance policy that named him as the beneficiary if Ashley died. If his plan had succeeded, he would have collected a payout and walked away free. They presented his affair with Vanessa as another piece of the puzzle. Michael had already started planning a future without Ashley. He had told Vanessa they would soon be able to be together. No more problems. The jury watched in silence as crime scene photos were displayed. The blackened scorch marks on the door handle, the carefully routed wiring leading back into the circuit breaker, the meticulous effort taken to ensure Ashley would never have a chance to survive. The prosecution called Ashley to the stand. She recounted in painful detail the moment she reached for the door handle, how her instincts told her something was wrong, how she later saw the security footage of Michael rigging the wires. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away from the jury. "He wanted me dead," she said simply, "and if I had touched that door, I would be." Michael Wilson is behind bars. The case remains a haunting example of how calculated an attack can be, and how survival sometimes comes down to a split-second decision. For Ashley Wilson, the scars of that night remain, but so does her resilience. Ashley sat in the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap, as the judge read the sentence. 3 years. That was all. Her hands clenched into fists as she struggled to contain her frustration. Michael had tried to end her life. He had put thought, effort, and planning into making sure she and their unborn child wouldn't survive. And yet he would serve only a handful of years behind bars. After the trial, reporters swarmed Ashley outside the courthouse, asking how she felt about the sentencing. Her voice was steady, but her expression betrayed the anger beneath the surface. "I don't know how long he'll serve," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "But I do know that when he gets out, I'll still be looking over my shoulder." Michael Wilson's case stands as a harrowing reminder of how intimate relationships can turn deadly. His actions were not impulsive. They were calculated, deliberate, and carried out with full knowledge of what he was attempting to do. Ashley Wilson survived because she trusted her instincts. A simple hesitation, a moment of doubt, saved her life. Had she not stopped to check her phone, had she not sensed something was wrong, the outcome could have been very different. Despite the conviction, the short sentence left lingering questions about justice. Should intent alone be enough for a harsher penalty? Should an attempt at taking a life be punished as severely as a successful murder? For Ashley, the fear didn't end when the courtroom doors closed. She would spend the rest of her life knowing that the man who once vowed to love her had meticulously planned her death. And one day, he would walk free. But for now, she held on to one truth. She had survived. In the months following the harrowing events that transpired in December 2017, Ashley Wilson embarked on a journey of healing and renewal. Determined to distance herself from the traumatic memories associated with her former residence, she sought a fresh start in a new environment. Ashley found solace in a modest apartment nestled within a supportive community. The space, though small, offered her a sanctuary where she could rebuild her life and prepare for the arrival of her child. One of her first endeavors was to transform a spare room into a nursery. With gentle determination, she painted the walls in soothing hues, each brushstroke symbolizing a step away from the shadows of her past. As she worked, she hummed lullabies, the melodies filling the room with a sense of hope and anticipation. Among the cherished items she placed in the nursery was a framed ultrasound image, capturing the first glimpse of the life growing within her. This photograph served as a beacon of resilience, reminding her of the strength she summoned to protect herself and her unborn child. On a crisp morning, Ashley stepped outside her new home. The warmth of the sun caressed her face, and she closed her eyes, savoring the simple pleasure of safety and freedom. The gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds provided a comforting soundtrack to her thoughts. Taking a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I survived." These words, though softly spoken, resonated with the profound courage and determination that had carried her through her ordeal. If you found this documentary compelling, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful true crime story. Help us continue to shine a light on stories that matter. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Stay aware.